Hey everybody, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board ranking video. This is where I rank and review the last 5 new to me board games in order of preference. Now today's video might be a little bit shorter than usual because 3 of these games at least were very light and aren't going to take you very long to talk about. But before we get started on these 5 very different games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, Kienda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 5, I have Chabyrinthe. At least I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is a puzzly game as you are trying to connect these cats to this kind of home through these series of drain pipes. So essentially at the start of the game you're setting up this, I think it's a 4x4 grid of these square cards, each of which depicts a different kind of route or a set of pathways where these drain pipes go. And what you're trying to do is, on your turn, I think you get 2 actions, and you can use those actions in one of 2 different ways. The first of which is to rotate one of those cards, I believe 90 degrees, which will drastically change the orientation of the pipes and where things lead to. And the second one is to introduce a new card into that 4x4 grid by pushing and shimmy along the cards in that particular row or column, and obviously introducing that new one in the place of the existing one. So, you know, mechanically very simple, just one of 2 choices. But these homes and these cats kind of sit on the outer rim or the border of that 4x4 grid, and they kind of go in the drain pipes and come out a different one. And as long as there is a clean, uninterrupted route from one or even more cats to that particular home on your turn, then you will get those cats as points, and the cats are worth, you know, varying amount of points, so you might want to prioritize some over the other. That's pretty much what the game entails. It's very quick, simple stuff, and I have to admit, I was playing this somewhat as an autopilot because the decisions for me were very obvious and easy to to pick the optimal choice. And I understand this game is probably marketed or aimed towards maybe a younger audience, so I think maybe kids could get some enjoyment out of this one. But for me, again, I found it too easy. Sometimes rounds or cats would just land on the lap of one player and it would kind of shaft the other player and they wouldn't really have much control over it. So I think if you have players of equal skill levels or spatial awareness, then it's going to come down to luck really, because again, it's not exactly a taxing puzzle to try and overcome. And I thought that the way that once cats were claimed, the way they respawned was a bit, I don't know, it was a bit underwhelming, because it seemed like you could very quickly divert those cats to your path as well. So it seemed like often there was like a rich get richer thing going on, and if you could line up one, you could very quickly line up the next one as well. So for me, this one was a bit of a dud. It wasn't terrible, and I suppose it achieved what it was supposed to. If you're that connecting pipes mechanism, I think it was a good idea. But again, I thought the decision space was very lacking. And again, if you're a more seasoned gamer, you're not really going to get much value out of this one. So that is Chabyrinthe at number 5. At number 4, I have Get Bit. So this is a filler game that's been around for a long time. I believe there's been several iterations of this game. I played the newest one with the kind of bath toy aesthetic. And what this is it's a filler game where you are trying to outlast the other players by avoid getting bitten by the shark piece. And the way you do that is through simultaneous card selection. So at the start of the game, everyone is given an identical set of number cards. I believe they go from 1 up to 9 or something similar. And then, again, at the same time, everyone's going to choose a card and reveal them at the same time. Any doubles or triples or more than that are going to cancel each other out. And then starting from the lowest going to the highest, those divers are going to move to the front of the queue. At least, your piece is going to move to the front of the queue. And eventually, once everyone's taken their turn, by as you go through the numbers, keep moving to the front of the queue. Whoever's left at the back will be bitten by the shark and will lose a limb. So essentially, you've got 4 limbs, so you've got your 2 legs and your 2 arms. And I think once all those have gone, you are going to be eliminated from the game. So there is some elimination here, but we are talking about a 20-minute game here. Now, I must admit, I did play this game incorrectly, and I think I might have slightly changed my view on it, because at the time I found it way too random and you just couldn't determine what the other players were going to do. But it actually turns out that if you get bit, you get your cards back, and you also go to the front of the queue. And whereas we played it, when people were getting bit, they remained at the back of the queue and they didn't get their cards back, meaning that they kind of got punished a bit, and it was harder for them to catch up, especially if you're going in turn order and then you play 3 different numbers, or more different numbers, then you're going to end up where you ended up in the first place. So that's not really a well-balanced system, when it turns out the game itself did actually address that correctly. So that's on me, but I don't think it would have changed my ranking of the game at all. But if anything, this game does scale extremely well. I think it tailors up to like 8 players or something, which is nice for a kind of a throwaway, turn your brain off style game with a bit of, I'm not going to say nastiness, but a bit of punishment in this game. A lot of these ultra light games are a bit too whimsical, a bit too, oh, you won, whatever. This one, at least you're kind of laughing at your opponent's despair and so on. So it does have a little bit of edge to it, which I did like. And I definitely do need to play this game at a higher player count to get the full feel of it, because we did play, I believe, at 3 or 4 players, which isn't optimal, I have to say. So if you're looking at a very fast, easy to play that anybody can play, and you want that at a higher player count, then this one might be a good option for you. But for my game group, which normally sits around 3 or 4 players, it's not ideal really. But still, I can definitely see why people like it, and it's a nice example of I suppose the cleanest example possible of that simultaneous card play mechanism. So that is Get Bit at number 4. At number 3, I have Sequoia. Now this is a dice-driven area control game where you have these kind of 11 areas, and on each of these areas you have 2 different points tokens. So of course first place is going to get the higher amount of points if you control it at the end of the game, and then the next amount of points will go to the second place. And the way you put your influence on these different zones is through this dice rolling system, where each player will secretly have 5 dice. You're going to roll them, and then you are going to discard one of them, and you're going to put the other 2 in pairs. And basically, depending on the numbers that you decide, that is going to show which zone you deploy your little leaf tokens into, which of course determines your influence in that zone. So, of course, you've got the 2 zone, the 3 zone, 4 zone, all the way up to number 12. And because everyone's doing it simultaneously, you don't quite know where everyone's going to go. Perhaps there's a big high scoring zone here that everyone's fiercely fighting over, but a strategy might be to go for several of the lower point scoring areas where the competition isn't so fierce. But of course, it's all about trying to decide where your opponents might go, and of course being restricted by what you've rolled in the first place. And I don't believe there was any mitigation in this game either, so you're pretty much getting what you've rolled without any ability to re-roll at all, which I actually don't think was a bad idea for this game, because it doesn't try to be anything it's not. It is super light, introductory, base level, 20-minute area control game. And if you like games like Can't Stop, this might be a good one for you. A different twist on that mechanism, because again, if you roll something that you can't deploy, then or it's going to be a wasteful deployment for you, then that's tough. There's nothing really you can do with that. But at the same time, it does also remind me a little bit of Rumble Nation, where you're trying to again put those perfect sets of dice together to try and exploit that and get into the zones that you want. So again, very simple stuff. It had quite a nice little sudden death mechanism as well, where if you and your opponent are tying for a region by the end of the game, you keep going until you've determined who the winner could be. Again, purely based on the dice really, but it did add a little bit of spice to the game. And all in all, it was very pleasant. Again, it's going to be good at that 4-player count, and for a it's again super easy to jump into area control game. This is a nice example. Again, it doesn't try to add on or bolt on any mechanisms that aren't really required, and it stays in its lane, which is what I liked about it. So that is Sequoia. Very pleasant, straightforward stuff at number 3. At number 2, I have Paris, the City of Lights. So this is a 2-player head-to-head game, and that's very puzzly in its nature, and it's a game of 2 halves. So in the first half of the game, you are either deploying your little tiles onto the main board, and on those tiles there's going to be basically 3 different colours. You've got your own colour, you've got your opponent's colour, and you've also got a neutral colour where both of you could potentially place your pieces onto the map. And now the second choice you can make is to draft one of these polyomino tiles that you'll be used to deploy in the second half of the game, which is going to be one of the ways you score your points. So it's all about trying to lay the foundation of that board, trying to orientate those tiles so that you have a big catchment area about where you could potentially place your polyomino tiles, maybe trying to isolate your opponent's pieces on the corner of the map so you know they can't sneak anything in there later. But I do like that tension of, am I going to really try and dominate the board space and get all the different kind of patterns that I need? But as I'm doing that, my opponent might be grabbing all the best tiles that I might need. And there's a little bit of a push luck mechanism to it as well, because generally speaking, the bigger kind of surface area polyomino tiles will or could potentially score you much more points, but placing them is going to be much more difficult, which ties directly into that board coverage of laying the the cobblestones instead. Now, once you have placed all your tiles and drafted the polyomino shapes that you want, you'll go into the second half of the game, which is when things really get interesting. Because in this half of the game is where you're going to be deploying the polyomino tiles that you've drafted in the first round, or you will be using these special ability tiles. And I suppose I should talk about what you're actually trying to do here. So basically, on those on the main board and on the tiles that you've deployed, not only is it the 3 different colours, you've also got these street lamps, which is going to be your multiplier. So you're aiming to get your buildings next to the lamps for this multiplier. So if you get, say, a 5 surface area building next to 2 lamps, that'll be 2 lamps times the 5 surface area for 10 points. So again, very straightforward scoring system here. Now, much like the first round, but in fact, I would say the intensity is turned right up. That turn angst and that kind of opportunity cost comes through so strongly. Because again, of course, you want to get your polyomino shapes onto the map straight away to control it and make sure it's yours before your opponent gobbles it up. But at the same time, all of these ability postcards that you can choose from are extremely powerful and can get you out of really tricky situations. So for example, that might let you put a new street lamp down in the perfect opportunity for you. It might let you extend a building to touch a new lamp. It might let you put these statues or features down that will score you points in different ways, or even let you change tiles that you drafted and changed your mind on. And another big factor in the game is if you cannot place your polyomino tiles that you drafted in the first round, then they're going to be worth negative points. And of course, there is a postcard to mitigate that. So a great example of whatever you do, your opponent will kind of fill in the space the void that you left by choosing the opposite thing. So lots of turn angst here, and yeah, super fast as well. But I think the decision space and the autonomy, and again that pressure really shines through wonderfully for a 20-minute game. It has a lovely table presence, and I was actually very happy with how this game turned out to be. I did go into it with a complete open mind because I had heard good things about it, but it was a game that I'd seen on the second-hand market quite a lot, so I thought that might tell a story that people aren't really digging this one. But I am digging it. I think it's really well designed. It's so finely tuned. I like the fact that each time you play this game, there's a different orientation of these postcards, so you're not always having the same options. And yeah, I just really like it. It's a smart and sophisticated 2-player only game with a lovely look, lovely presence, but a super tense feel to it. And I would really recommend this one if you want a good 2-player game for your collection. So that is Paris, the City of Lights, at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Saltfjord. So Saltfjord is the reiteration of the classic Santa Maria dice drafting Euro that I really enjoyed from a few years ago. Love the core mechanisms in Santa Maria, but I thought it did lack a little bit in replayability, and unfortunately I never got my hands on the pretty rare expansion for Santa Maria, which may have been the reason why I ended up passing with it. But when I heard that Santa Maria was getting a reprinting with a new skin, some new mechanisms, different facets of the game, I was super keen and had my eyes peeled for this one. And of course, I finally got myself a copy. Now, at its core, the game is very similar. I would say maybe 75 to 80% of the same as Santa Maria, which is a good thing in my opinion, especially when it comes to the resource management system and the dice drafting system. As a whole, I do have a bit of a bias towards dice drafting games. It's one of my favourite mechanisms. I tend to like Euros with random input, but not random output. And I like the way you have to make the most of the dice you're drafting here by prioritising the actions you want and grabbing stuff before your opponents do. And this one has that in spades. But if you're not familiar with that main resource mechanism in Santa Maria, or I should say Saltfjord, you are basically drafting dice, and then depending on the row and column you take them, or they associate to, you'll trigger all of the buildings in that column or row and then block that final space with the dice you've just drafted. Which means that if you keep taking the same action, you're pretty much getting it weaker each time, but it does mean you can keep on triggering the same building if you want to. Now, these things that you're triggering will not only get you resources, they'll also give you your actions you can take, and these actions are pretty simple in their own right. It might be going up this fishing track, which will get you these fishing tokens to load onto your boat. The fish are going to be a great mitigation tool, or you can get points and different things. And I like this little twist on the game where, yes, you are collecting these resources on your boat, but you don't get them until you return to the harbour. So there's this kind of delayed gratification thing going on there. So that's one of the main features. That's definitely a new thing in the game. Another new thing in the game is these technology tracks rather than a kind of a progress track, where you can unlock stronger abilities as you climb up these different tech tracks, and eventually unlock some powerful endgame scoring as well, which is completely variable, so each game is going to feel different. And I really did like how these technology tracks were worth going for. So they might let you really improve your ability to fish by getting to the better fish schools, or they might increase the capacity of your boat, so meaning that you have to return to harbour less often, and so on, or even just like resources or gold, which is your wild resource, and so on. The degree of engine building in this game is top notch. When you're building new things, you're putting them directly onto your player board, making those rows and columns stronger. So there's a great forward momentum in this game where your board's getting better and better. And I also like the way that each round, it's only a 3-round game, you're talking about a 75-minute game here. Each round new dice are introduced, so there's more opportunities to exploit your board further and further. There's some contract fulfillment as well, which is an important part of the game, because that's a good use of your resources to get these points. Just simple contract fulfillment. Get this resource to take this tile. If you do that, you'll get the points, but you'll also flip that tile face down, put it next to your player board, which means that when it comes to the end of the round, you'll get some passive actions and some passive income, which can really give you a leg up on your opponent if you invest heavily in that. Do you want to go all in on a particular type of order? Maybe get a bunch of extra fishing actions or extra resources and so on? Or do you want to diversify and give yourself a boost on each of them and also unlock some more endgame scoring? So I thought this game was an absolute joy to play, very easy to play as well. And the setup was a little bit of a bugbear, but I am nitpicking. But I'm so glad, and I must say, I think this game struck the familiarity with the original and adding new stuff perfectly. They really did hit that nail on the head. And it kind of addressed all of the issues that I had with the original Santa Maria, which, again, I see all the issues. It was not much of an issue at all, to be honest. It was just replayability. This game did that with those tech tree changes, and also with the the variable objectives that you're aiming for endgame scoring. And I did think that, and I have to say they did pull this off. I don't think they only wanted to add some mechanical changes to the game. I think they wanted to up the excitement of the game, and I think they achieved that through that fishing mechanism, because you are blind diving into these piles. And you have a rough idea what's in those piles, but that little dopamine hit of what you're going to pull out of the water really did shine through nicely. And I would love to see maybe like a mini expansion to play on that a little bit more by adding different set collection mechanisms, which will really incentivize you to go fishing and load your boat in different ways. But still, if you like the original, you'll definitely like this one. If you didn't like the original, you probably won't like this one. But if you're on the fence, like I was, you will probably prefer this one, in my opinion. So this is a wonderful Euro. I love that resource mechanism. A great use of dice drafting with good turn angst. Yeah, there's not really much I can complain about this game at all. And I hope they support it to keep on injecting life into the games with, as I said, extra little modules with fishing tokens, maybe even just some extra endgame scoring opportunities, and so on. But stay true to that lovely personal board building and that resource management puzzle. I think it's just so clever and so well polished and refined. So lived up to my expectations big time, and it's definitely going to be a contender for Euro of the Year for me. I know it's a 2024 game, but in terms of my own personal awards, my Chairman's Choice Awards for 2025, I think this one's got a really good chance of being Euro of the Year. I think it's that good, and it's going to be sticking around for some time in my collection. So that is Saltfjord. Loved it. At number 1. So there we have it. That concludes another ranking video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.